Harrington estate had always been too quiet at night, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, making you wonder what might be hiding in the shadows. But on this night, that silence was shattered. A cry, sharp, terrified, unmistakably a child's cry, split the dark hallway like glass breaking. Maya Williams froze where she stood, the laundry basket slipping from her hands. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd imagined it. But then came the sound again, louder this time. "Noah," she whispered. Her pulse thundered. She sprinted down the corridor, past the oil paintings of Harrington ancestors staring down with cold, painted eyes. The doors loomed tall and heavy, but she didn't hesitate. She threw open the nursery door. And there, bathed in the dim blue glow of a nightlight, was little Noah Harrington, the boy she had come to love like her own. He was standing in his crib, cheeks wet with tears, reaching toward her with desperate hands. But it wasn't Noah who made Maya's heart stop. It was Camille Harrington, the mother, the lady of the house, the woman of power and pedigree. She was sitting in the rocking chair, not rocking, not comforting, but laughing, a soft, broken laugh. The laugh of someone far past reason. A crystal glass dangled from her fingertips, sloshing amber liquid onto the carpet. Her silk robe hung open at the collar, her hair falling wild around her face. "What are you doing here?" Camille Harrington slurred, her words sticky with drink. Maya Williams rushed to Noah, gathering the trembling boy into her arms. His sobs quieted against her shoulder, but her own heart was still racing. "I heard him crying," Maya said, her voice unsteady. He was screaming." Camille waved the glass as if brushing away a fly. "Babies cry. That's what they do. You think you're the savior here?" Her laugh grew louder, more jagged. And then, as if remembering herself, Camille Harrington leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Put him down, Maya. You're frightening him." But it wasn't Maya who had frightened him. It was her. Maya Williams wanted to scream, to shout the truth so loudly that the walls would remember it, but she bit down hard, tasting the copper of her own silence. "Camille," she said softly. He was gasping, choking. Something could have happened. "Nothing happened," Camille snapped, rising too quickly from the chair. The glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Noah flinched, and Maya held him tighter. "Nothing," Camille repeated, her voice trembling now with fury instead of laughter. "Do you understand me? You saw nothing. You will say nothing." Maya felt the weight of those words pressing down like chains. She had seen enough in her life to know when someone wanted to bury the truth. But then the door creaked open. Richard Harrington stood in the doorway. Tall, imposing, the sharp lines of his face carved in shadow. His presence filled the room like a sudden storm. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice low, dangerous. His eyes darted from the broken glass to his wife, then to Maya, holding his son. For a brief, impossible second, Maya thought he would see, that he would understand. But Camille was faster. "She barged in here!" Camille's voice rose in mock outrage. "She snatched Noah from me, woke him up, and now she's accusing me." She pressed a hand dramatically against her chest. "Richard, she's trying to turn you against me." Maya shook her head, words tangled in her throat. "No, that's not what happened. He was—" Richard raised a hand. "Enough." His eyes locked on Maya's, hard and unreadable. "You forget yourself, Miss Williams. Put my son back in his crib. Now." The world tilted. Maya felt her knees weaken, but she steadied herself, lowering Noah gently into the crib. The boy whimpered, reaching after her, but she stepped back. Richard's gaze lingered on her for a long, punishing moment. Then he turned to his wife, his voice softening. "Camille, are you all right?" The unfairness of it struck like a slap. Maya stood there, invisible, accused, while the true danger smirked behind a veil of silk and perfume. Maya Williams left the nursery with her head bowed, but inside a storm was raging. Her footsteps echoed down the hall, each one heavier than the last. She had come running because a child cried out for help, and now she was the one being treated like a criminal. In the kitchen, Lydia, The senior housekeeper, with eyes like polished steel, was waiting. She must have heard the commotion. "What happened?" Lydia asked, her tone clipped. Maya hesitated. Every instinct told her to speak the truth, to shout it from the rooftops. But Richard Harrington's voice still rang in her ears. "You forget yourself, Miss Williams." "She said I frightened him," Maya whispered. Lydia's mouth tightened. "And did you?" "No, he was—" Maya stopped. Her words faltered, because she saw the look in Lydia's eyes, the cold calculation, the quiet satisfaction. Lydia already knew which side she stood on. "You're new here," Lydia said finally. "Let me give you some advice. This house has its own rules. You may think you're here to serve the child, but you are here to serve Mrs. Harrington. Remember that, and you may survive." Maya felt the sting of humiliation burn through her chest. Survive. That was the word Lydia had chosen. Not live, not work. Survive. And in that moment, Maya Williams understood. This house was not just filled with wealth and secrets. It was filled with traps. As she lay awake later that night in her small servant's room, the cries of Noah still echoing in her ears, one thought carved itself deep into her heart. If she stayed, she would suffer. But if she left, who would protect him? The silence of the Harrington estate returned, heavy, suffocating, as if it had swallowed her answer whole.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you won't miss what's next.
It started small, as things in great houses often do. A missing brooch, a misplaced bottle of perfume, a silk scarf gone from a drawer. The kinds of things that could vanish anywhere, blamed on carelessness or forgetfulness. But here, in the Harrington estate, such things never vanished without someone to blame. And soon the whispers began. Maya Williams felt them before she heard them. The sudden silence when she entered a room, the quick sideways glances between maids polishing the silver, the way the butler's eyes lingered a second too long on her hands when she carried trays. At first she tried to ignore it. She focused on her work, her careful folding of linen, her quiet laughter with Noah Harrington as he toddled toward her arms. But whispers have a way of growing teeth. By the second week she heard it clearly. "She takes things," one maid murmured in the corridor. "I heard it from Lydia herself," another whispered back. "Miss Williams can't be trusted." The words hit like cold water, though Maya kept walking. That evening in the pantry, she reached for the tin of tea only to find a silver spoon sitting conspicuously at the top, one she had never placed there. And Lydia was watching from the doorway, her arms folded, her mouth curved in a thin smile. "You should be more careful, Miss Williams," Lydia said softly. "People are talking." Maya's hands trembled as she set the spoon aside. She wanted to scream the truth, that she had taken nothing, that she worked harder than anyone, that she only wanted to protect Noah. But the weight of the lies pressed heavier than any proof she could offer. The next blow came not from whispers, but from Camille Harrington herself. It was after dinner, the air heavy with the scent of roasted meat and red wine. Richard Harrington had retreated to his study, leaving the dining room in the control of his wife. Camille sat at the head of the table, her eyes glittering with mischief, her smile just a shade too sharp. The staff were clearing plates when she spoke, loudly enough for every ear in the room. "Richard is too trusting," Camille drawled, swirling her wineglass. "He doesn't see what I see, how some people come into this house pretending to serve, but really they're only here to take." Her gaze landed squarely on Maya Williams. The room froze. Even the clatter of cutlery seemed to stop. Maya's breath caught, but she forced herself to keep moving, to keep her hands steady as she collected the dishes. Camille leaned back, her laugh low and cruel. "It's in the blood, you know. Some people are born to steal, to scheme. You can dress them up in uniforms, but you can't wash away what they are." The words were sharper than glass, cutting into Maya's skin. She knew what Camille meant. She wasn't just calling her a thief. She was dragging her skin color into the open, lacing the insult with centuries of venom. No one spoke. No one defended her. The silence was worse than the insult. Maya lowered her eyes, her cheeks burning, But inside, deep in her chest where no one could touch, something hardened. She had survived worse. She had survived childhood without parents, shelters that stank of mildew, strangers who saw her as less than human. She would survive this too. But as she left the dining room that night, the sound of Camille's laughter followed her down the hall like a chain around her neck. That night, Maya Williams sat in her small servant's room, the single lamp casting shadows across the cracked plaster walls. She held Noah's blanket in her lap, the one he always clutched in his sleep. It smelled faintly of lavender and milk. Her hands shook as she smoothed the fabric, but her thoughts burned steady. They wanted to break her, to smear her name until even Richard Harrington believed she was nothing but a thief, to strip away her dignity until she left the house in shame. But leaving meant abandoning Noah. Leaving meant letting Camille Harrington win. Maya stared at the blanket, at the tiny stitches along its edge. She thought of Noah's small hand clutching her finger, his dark eyes filled with trust. And in that moment, her fear transformed into something else. Resolve. She whispered into the stillness of her room, her voice trembling but fierce. I will not run. I will not be silenced. If I have to stand alone, I will fight. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Inside, in the quiet heart of the Harrington estate, a battle line had been drawn. Maya Williams was no longer just a maid in a house of secrets. She was a woman who had chosen to fight back, and the war had only just begun. The hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Sharp, clean, too bright against the memory of that terrible night. Maya Williams walked quickly through the corridors, her palms damp, her breath shallow. She had not returned here since Noah's accident. Since the night she had pressed her trembling hands against the child's wound, shouting for help while Camille Harrington laughed with a glass of wine in her hand. Every step brought back the echo of that cry. Noah's cry. She almost turned back. Almost. But then she saw her, Nurse Jackson. The woman was in her 50s, tall with kind eyes that seemed to carry the weight of too many nights and too many children's tears. When she spotted Maya, she paused, then approached quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Maya Williams. Her voice was low, careful. I've been waiting for you. Maya's throat tightened. You remember that night? Nurse Jackson nodded. I remember everything. The boy bleeding, you holding him, and Mrs. Harrington, unsteady, slurring her words, smelling of gin. She leaned closer, her voice firm. Don't let anyone tell you different. I'll testify to it. Anytime, any place. Maya's heart nearly broke with relief. For weeks she had felt alone, silenced, cornered, accused. But here was a voice of truth, strong and steady, willing to stand beside her. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. Thank you, Nurse Jackson. The woman squeezed her hand. Be careful, child. You've stepped into something bigger than yourself. Powerful people protect their own, and they don't forgive those who challenge them. Maya nodded. She already knew, but hearing it aloud made the danger feel sharper, like the edge of a knife against her throat. That evening, back at the Harrington estate, the house was quiet, too quiet. The chandeliers gleamed, the carpets muffled every step, but beneath the luxury was tension, a silence that wasn't peace, but threat. Maya had just finished folding laundry in the service wing when a voice came from the shadows. Miss Williams. She turned, startled. It was Harold, the night guard. His uniform was worn at the edges, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes tired. He had worked for the Harringtons longer than anyone could remember. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I've watched this house for 30 years. I've seen how it chews people up. Staff who talk too much, staff who cross the wrong person. They don't last. He paused, his gaze heavy on her. If you want to live, Miss Williams, you stay quiet. You keep your head down. You forget what you saw. Maya's chest tightened. And if I can't? She asked softly. The old guard's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he muttered almost like a prayer. Then God help you, because no one else will. He walked away before she could reply, his footsteps fading down the long hall. Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding. His warning was meant as kindness, she knew, but it was also a reminder. This house wasn't safe. Not for her, not for Noah. And still she couldn't turn away. Not when a child's life hung in the balance. Later that night, Maya sat in her small servant's room. On the bed before her lay the only things that could save her, or destroy her. A thumb drive Elena, the young maid, had slipped into her hand one afternoon, whispering that she had copied a piece of security footage before Lydia erased it. A crumpled piece of paper where Maya had scribbled every insult Camille Harrington had hissed at her, word for word. And now the promise of Nurse Jackson's testimony. Together they were fragments of truth. Shards sharp enough to cut through lies, but fragile. Too fragile. A knock came at the door. Maya tensed, then opened it. Elena slipped inside, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously. "Do you still have it?" Elena whispered. Maya nodded. She showed her the drive, hidden in the lining of an old book. "If they find out," Elena's voice shook, "they'll come for both of us. Camille doesn't forgive. Lydia doesn't forget." "I know," Maya said quietly, "but we can't destroy it. Not now. Not ever. It's the only protection we have." Elena swallowed hard, then nodded. "Then we hide it. Together. No one else can know." They wrapped the book in cloth and slid it into a hollow in the floorboard beneath the bed. Maya pressed the wood back into place, her fingers trembling. The secret was buried, but the danger was not. As Elena slipped back into the hallway, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, listening to the old house creak in the wind. She thought of Nurse Jackson's brave promise, of Harold's grim warning, of the fragile alliance now bound by silence and fear. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, a vow, a prayer, a challenge. They want me silent, but silence has never saved anyone. This time, the truth will speak, even if it has to speak through me. And in that vow, Maya Williams felt the first glimmer of strength that came not from survival, but from resistance. The house around her was full of secrets, but now for the first time, she was not facing them alone. It began with paper. Notes slipped under doors, letters folded tight into envelopes without names, words cut sharp as knives, accusing, mocking, poisonous. Maya Williams found the first one tucked into her apron pocket after breakfast. The handwriting was elegant, looping, almost delicate. But the message: "Thieves don't last long in this house. Pack your things before you're thrown out." Her throat closed. She glanced around the empty hall. No footsteps, no witnesses, only silence, and the note burning in her hand. The second arrived the next evening, left on her pillow. This one was worse. "Richard Harrington deserves a woman of class, not a desperate servant. Everyone sees you for what you are, a schemer." By the third letter, Maya knew. These weren't careless insults. They were a campaign, a war in ink. Someone wanted her out. Someone clever enough to strike from the shadows. That night she sat at her small desk, the 3 notes spread before her, the lamp flickering. Her chest ached with the weight of them. She could feel the walls closing in, but she also knew this was only the beginning. At dinner the next evening, Camille Harrington swept into the dining hall in a silk gown, her hair coiled in an immaculate twist. She looked fragile, almost ethereal, her pale face drawn, her voice trembling just enough to stir sympathy. "Richard," she whispered, pressing a hand to her temple, "I feel so weak. Ever since that awful night, I can hardly breathe without trembling. And yet, Camille's eyes flicked toward Maya, then away as if it pained her. "She delights in my suffering." Maya froze, the spoon in her hand shaking. Richard Harrington looked between them, his jaw tight, his eyes softened on Camille. "No one here delights in your pain," he said. Camille let out a trembling sigh. "But Richard, she watches me. She whispers with the staff. I found my jewelry box moved from its place yesterday. I'm afraid." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Afraid in my own home." Maya's mouth opened. But no words came. If she defended herself, it would sound like protest. If she stayed silent, the lie would harden into truth. Camille leaned against Richard's arm, her voice breaking. I am the victim here. Why can't anyone see it? Richard stiffened. He said nothing, but Maya saw it, the shadow of doubt flickering in his eyes. She lowered her gaze, her heart hammering. This was Camille's game, playing the broken wife, the wounded mother, the fragile rose crushed under the heel of a cruel maid. And Richard was starting to believe it. The turning point came 3 days later. Maya was in the linen room folding sheets when she heard hushed voices in the hallway. She recognized Lydia, the head maid, her tone sharp, impatient. He'll believe it, trust me. Just say you saw her leaving the study. Drop the earring where it can't be missed. By morning, Richard will have no choice but to question her. Maya's chest tightened. She stepped closer, holding her breath. Then the other voice, Elena, younger, nervous. But what if he asks me? What if he knows I'm lying? Lydia hissed. Then you lie better. Camille's counting on it. Do you want to keep your job or not? Maya's pulse thundered. A trap. They were setting a trap for her. She waited until Lydia's footsteps faded down the corridor, leaving Elena behind. Quietly, Maya stepped out of the linen room. Elena! Her voice was steady, but inside she trembled. What did you just agree to? The younger maid jumped, color draining from her face. I didn't mean… Elena. Maya's gaze held hers. You know the truth. You were there that night. You saw what I did for Noah. If you lie for her, you're part of this. For a long moment, silence pressed between them. Then Elena's eyes filled with tears. She pulled a small velvet earring from her apron pocket. The trap. I didn't want to. Lydia said I had to. But I can't do this to you. Maya reached out, closing Elena's trembling hand over the earring. Then don't. Stand with the truth. Even if you're afraid. Elena nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll hide it. I'll say nothing. But please, be careful. Lydia isn't just cruel. She's loyal to Camille. And Camille doesn't stop until she wins. Maya exhaled, a weight lifting just slightly. It wasn't a victory anyone else would see. No applause, no recognition. But to her, it was the first small triumph. Proof that lies could crack, that fear could break, that truth could shine through even in shadows. That night, as she lay awake, the letters still hidden beneath her mattress, Maya whispered to herself, They think I'm alone. They think I'll break. But I am still here, and I am not done. And somewhere in the depths of the Harrington estate, Camille Harrington smiled in her silk gown, certain her war was working. Certain she was winning. Neither woman slept. Both were waiting for the next move. It was a stormy morning when the discovery was made. Maya Williams had been gathering laundry near the east wing when James, the young footman, appeared pale and breathless at the doorway. Miss Williams, you'd better come. He led her down a narrow hall into the storage pantry that servants rarely used. There, lying beneath a crate of old bottles, was a syringe. Its glass glinted under the dim light, a cruel shard of memory from that night in the nursery. Maya's breath caught. She knelt, careful not to touch it. Where did you find this? James swallowed. I was cleaning. Thought it was trash. But then, I remembered. Before she could respond, the sharp click of heels echoed. Lydia swept in, her lips tight, her eyes locked on Maya. Well, isn't that convenient, she sneered. The maid finds the very thing she's accused of inventing. What a miracle. Maya rose, her pulse quickening. I didn't put it there. But Lydia bent gracefully, picking up the syringe with a cloth. She raised her brows, her voice sharp as a blade. Then why was it under your crates, in your wing? Perhaps you kept it as a souvenir of your performance that night. Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to shout, to claw the lie from Lydia's tongue. But Richard Harrington himself appeared at the door, summoned by the commotion. His gaze fell on the syringe in Lydia's hand. Camille followed close behind, her silk robe flowing, her face a perfect mask of anguish. She gasped, too perfectly. Richard, she kept it. She kept it to torment me. Maya's lips parted in horror. That's not true. Someone planted it. Camille's hand fluttered to her chest, her voice trembling. Why would anyone plant such a thing unless it belonged to her all along? The silence in the room was suffocating. Richard's jaw worked, torn between the two women. Maya's eyes burned, but she held her ground. Test it. If you believe her, test it. The truth is in the blood that touched it. Camille faltered just slightly at that. Lydia's smirk slipped. Richard, still silent, took the syringe from Lydia with the cloth and said only, "We'll see." That evening, Maya walked into St. Stephen's Hospital, her steps heavy but resolute. She had asked Elena, the nurse, to arrange a meeting with one of the doctors who had seen Noah that night. Dr. Lewis was a tall, gray-haired man with steady eyes and the kind of voice that carried weight. He sat across from Maya in the quiet consultation room, the scent of antiseptic clinging to the air. "I remember that night," he said, folding his hands. "The boy's injuries weren't from a fall. He had marks on his arm, swelling from a puncture. We treated him immediately. If it hadn't been for you calling the ambulance, he might not have survived." Maya's chest tightened. "But Camille says—" "I know what she says." His gaze sharpened. "But facts don't bend to her words. That child was under threat, and the syringe proves it." Maya's throat burned with tears she refused to shed. Would you testify to that?" The doctor's eyes softened. "If I'm called, yes. But you need to understand something, Miss Williams. Families like the Harringtons, they bury things. They bury people. If you stand against them, you need more than one truth. You need an army of it." His warning sank into her bones. She left the hospital with a mix of relief and dread. She had a voice now, a voice of authority, of truth. But would it be enough to pierce Camille's web of lies? That night, the house was unnervingly quiet. Maya had just finished locking the nursery windows when she sensed movement in the courtyard below. A figure stood in the shadows near the fountain. The light caught the edge of her face. Camille Harrington. Maya's breath stilled. She stepped onto the balcony, her voice low, steady. "What do you want from me?" Camille looked up, her eyes glittering with malice. The mask was gone now. No fragility, no trembling hands, only venom. "You think a syringe and a doctor's words will save you?" she said, her voice smooth, carrying in the night air. "You're nothing, Maya Williams. You'll always be nothing." Maya gripped the railing. "I have the truth." Camille's smile was thin, cruel. "Truth is fragile. People crush it every day. But fear endures. If you ever open your mouth again, if you dare speak in court, or to Richard, or to anyone who matters." She leaned closer into the moonlight, her face a mask of cold hatred. "You will die. Do you understand me?" The words struck like ice. For a long moment, Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear. Then Camille turned, her heels echoing against the stone as she vanished into the shadows. Maya pressed a trembling hand against her chest. Her legs felt weak, but inside something had shifted. The fear was real. Yes, but beneath it burned a harder truth. Camille had revealed herself, not a victim, not a fragile rose, a predator, and predators could bleed. She whispered into the night, her voice steady despite the trembling in her body. "You can threaten me. You can try to bury me, but I will not disappear." Inside the nursery, Noah stirred in his sleep, a small cry escaping his lips. Maya rushed to his side, smoothing his hair, whispering soft comfort. And as she sat by his bed, she knew. The war had entered a new phase. This wasn't about whispers anymore. This was life or death. The Harrington estate glittered that night like a palace. Chandeliers blazed above velvet drapes, golden candelabras threw sparks across polished marble, and the sound of champagne flutes clinking echoed like fragile bells. For the city's elite, it was a celebration, one of Richard Harrington's quarterly gatherings, where politicians, heirs, and patrons of the arts mingled beneath painted ceilings as if they owned the very air. For Maya Williams, it was something else entirely. She had been summoned, not as a guest, not quite as a servant either. Richard had insisted she attend. "You should be seen," he had told her earlier, his tone clipped but oddly protective. "They need to understand who you are to Noah. Stand with me, Maya." So there she was, her simple navy dress pressed until it shone, her hair smoothed back, her heart pounding. She moved carefully through the throng of gowns and tuxedos, every gaze brushing her like cold water. Whispers curled in her wake. "Is that her? The maid? The one from the papers? She doesn't belong here." Maya lifted her chin, even as her palms dampened. She found her place near the edge of the room, always close to Noah, who sat under the watchful eye of his nanny in a side salon. The boy's laughter carried faintly through the noise, a reminder of why she endured. But then Camille Harrington entered. She wore emerald silk that shimmered with every step, her smile radiant, her presence magnetic. Conversation shifted instantly toward her, like iron to a magnet. She glided through the crowd, bestowing air kisses, a queen unseated but still adored. And when her eyes landed on Maya, the smile sharpened into a blade. It began with laughter. Camille's voice rose above the music, honey sweet and cruel. "Darling Richard, you didn't tell us your staff would be joining us at table. What a modern arrangement." Polite chuckles rippled through the guests. Richard's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Camille leaned closer to a cluster of ladies, her words designed to carry. "She's quite the actress, isn't she? One might almost believe she saved the child out of loyalty, rather than ambition." Maya's throat constricted. Her eyes darted to the floor, but the words kept coming. "I've always admired how some people can reinvent themselves," Camille continued, swirling her champagne. "From scrubbing floors to sipping cocktails with Charleston's finest. Quite the climb." She let the pause linger, her gaze sweeping deliberately over Maya's skin. "Though, of course, some stains never wash out." The laughter was sharper this time, crueler. A man in a tailored suit smirked. "Careful, Camille. You'll have us accused of poor taste." "Poor taste?" Camille's eyes glittered. "It's generosity, allowing the help to feel like family." Another burst of laughter. The words landed like blows, each one a reminder that in their eyes Maya would never be more than dirt that had somehow wandered onto their marble floors. Maya's fingers curled tight around her glass. She wanted to answer, to shout, to cut through their cruelty with the truth. But across the room, Noah looked up from his toys, his little hand waving toward her. His eyes were bright, trusting, unbroken by the venom in the air. And in that moment, Maya knew. Her fight was not for her pride. It was for him. So she swallowed the retort that burned in her throat. She straightened her back, and she let their laughter wash over her like acid. Scarring, but not fatal. The evening stretched like a test of endurance. Camille never stopped. Every toast, every anecdote carried a barbed edge. "We must be charitable," she told a congressman with a tinkling laugh. "After all, some people don't know their place until we remind them." And yet Maya stood steady. She served tea when asked. She fetched a shawl for a guest. She bore the sidelong glances and whispered words. Each humiliation pressed heavier on her chest, but she refused to break. Because breaking meant Noah would see. Breaking meant Camille would win. When the music swelled and couples drifted to the dance floor, Richard finally found her by the side wall. His face was taut, his eyes clouded. He said nothing. Not there, not with so many ears. But his silence was not indifference. It was fury held on a leash. Only later, after the guests had gone and the halls echoed with emptiness, did he speak. In his study, his voice was low, hoarse. "You shouldn't have had to endure that." Maya lifted her chin. "It wasn't about me. It was about Noah. He saw me standing. That's what matters." For a moment, Richard's gaze softened, but he looked away quickly, as though even kindness might be dangerous. Alone in her room that night, Maya finally let the tears fall. They burned hot, silent streams across her cheeks. She pressed a pillow against her mouth so no one would hear. It was her first great sacrifice, her dignity stripped in public, endured in silence. And yet it had been worth it. Because Noah had been safe, untouched by the cruelty that poisoned the champagne, and echoed in the marble halls. She whispered into the dark, "You can take my pride. You can strip me with your words, but you will not touch him, not while I breathe." Outside, the estate lay silent under a canopy of stars. Inside, a war raged in shadows, and Maya Williams, though wounded, had taken her first step into true battle. The Harrington estate had grown quieter in the weeks after the party, but silence was never safety. Silence was only a mask. Behind it, danger whispered. Maya Williams felt it each time she walked the corridors. Eyes followed her, not Richard Harrington's, not Noah's, but Lydia's. Lydia, the senior housemaid, glided like a phantom through the halls. For years she had served the Harrington family with precision. Polished silver, folded linens, secrets kept. Her expression rarely changed, her words measured and smooth. But lately, whenever Maya passed her, there was something in Lydia's gaze, a flicker, cold and calculating. One evening, as Maya set Noah's toys neatly on the nursery shelf, she overheard it, a voice hushed but distinct, leaking through the half-open service door. Lydia's voice. "Yes, Mrs. Harrington. Everything she does. I watch. I listen." A pause, then a soft, poisonous laugh. "Don't worry, she trusts me." Maya froze, her heart stuttering. Lydia was reporting to Camille. Every step, every whisper, every moment she thought she'd kept private, leaking straight into the hands of the woman who wanted her destroyed. Maya closed the nursery door quietly and pressed her back against it. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Betrayal wasn't a storm crashing down. It was a knife slipped between the ribs when you weren't looking, and Lydia had just cut her deep. It happened 2 nights later. The Harringtons were hosting a smaller dinner, just a handful of close acquaintances, no reporters, no fanfare. The air was softer than the gala, almost intimate, with wine flowing and candlelight glowing against the tall windows. Maya moved silently between rooms, tending to Noah, fetching a glass of water, keeping herself invisible. But invisibility shattered when Camille Harrington rose suddenly from her chair at the head of the table, her silk gown glittering like a serpent's skin. Her voice was sharp, meant for all to hear. "Richard, my bracelet, the diamond heirloom from my mother. It's gone." The room hushed. Richard's brow furrowed. "Gone? Camille, where?" She cut him off, her gaze flicking like a blade toward Maya. "It was in my room, and who else has been wandering the halls?" Maya's breath caught. "I haven't—" Camille's hand lifted, silencing her. "You were seen," she said coldly. "Lydia told me." Gas fluttered around the table. Lydia stepped forward from the shadows, her voice smooth as velvet. "I saw her near the jewelry box, sir. I thought it odd, but I said nothing until now." The air thickened, heavy with suspicion. Maya's chest constricted, her hands trembling at her sides. She looked at Richard, desperate. "Mr. Harrington, I would never steal. You know I wouldn't." Camille's smile was triumphant, her eyes glittering. "You can dress her up, Richard, parade her in front of your guests, but a thief is still a thief." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Maya wanted to shout, to demand they search her, search the room, search everywhere. But the trap was too perfect. Lydia's lie was smooth, Camille's performance flawless. And then, in the silence, a small voice broke through. "No!" Every head turned. In the doorway stood Noah Harrington, pajama-clad, clutching his stuffed bear. His voice trembled, but it carried. "No, Maya didn't take it." The room stilled. Camille's eyes widened, surprise flashing before fury. Richard rose from his chair, his face unreadable. "Noah, go back to bed." But Noah shook his head fiercely. "She didn't." He stepped into the dining room, small fists clenched. "Maya helps me. Maya takes care of me. Mommy dropped the bracelet last week. I saw it. On the floor." His little brow furrowed. "I saw it." Maya's breath hitched. Her heart swelled and ached all at once. The boy she had sworn to protect, protecting her in return. Camille's smile cracked, but she recovered quickly, bending toward him with false sweetness. "Darling, you must be mistaken. Children imagine—" "I don't imagine." Noah's voice rose, sharp and clear. You were yelling that night. Maya picked it up and put it back in your box. I saw her. Silence crashed over the room. Richard's gaze shifted slowly from his son to his wife. His voice was low, steady, and lethal. Is that true, Camille? For the first time in weeks, Camille faltered. Her lips parted, her eyes narrowing, but she said nothing. Richard's voice cut again. Answer me. Camille laughed softly, brittle, her mask slipping. Children, remember things strangely. But the damage was done. The doubt was no longer aimed at Maya. It hovered over Camille. Maya knelt beside Noah, smoothing his hair. Her voice shook, but it was firm. Thank you, sweetheart. Noah clung to her hand, his little voice trembling. I won't let them hurt you. Tears pricked Maya's eyes, but she blinked them back. She had endured whispers, humiliation, and now betrayal. But in that moment, she knew she wasn't alone, because truth had found a voice in the innocent defiance of a child, and that truth would be her shield. The day had been long, but quiet, too quiet. Maya Williams tucked Noah into bed, humming softly as the boy drifted into sleep. For a moment, the world felt still. She closed the nursery door gently and returned to her small room in the staff wing. That was when she saw it, an envelope, slipped under her door. No name, no seal, just cream-colored paper lying on the floor like a waiting snake. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. Inside was a single sheet, words scrawled in sharp, angry strokes. You think you're safe. You're not. Walk away before you're buried. Maya's throat tightened. She had faced Camille Harrington's venom before, but this felt different. The letters cut into the page as if written with hatred itself. Her mind raced. Who had left it? Lydia carrying out Camille's orders? Camille herself slipping through the night unseen? Or someone else hired to frighten her into leaving? She sank onto the edge of her bed, the note trembling in her hand. Fear crawled under her skin like ice, but beneath it was something harder, sharper. Rage. They wanted her silent. They wanted her gone. She whispered into the empty room, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. Not this time. I won't run. The estate at night was vast and hushed, lit only by the glow of lanterns along the gravel paths. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. Somewhere beyond the gates, Charleston slept, but danger was awake. Around midnight, Harris, the old security guard, spotted it first, a figure lingering at the wrought iron gate, half shrouded in darkness. Too tall, too poised to be a wandering vagrant. The silhouette didn't move, only watched. Harris stiffened, his hand tightening on the flashlight. Who's there? His voice echoed through the night. The figure shifted, a faint gleam of pale skin catching in the moonlight. A familiar stance, elegant, predatory. Camille. She said nothing, only stood with the poise of a queen surveying her domain. Then slowly, deliberately, she raised a hand and touched the gate. The gesture was intimate, almost caressing, as though she were claiming what lay beyond. Harris stepped closer, his voice hard. You're not welcome here. Step away before I call the police. Camille's laugh floated through the bars, soft and cruel. Call them. Tell them a mother came to see her son. Maya had crept to the balcony above the courtyard, drawn by the sound of voices. From there she saw it all. The moonlight striking Camille's auburn hair, the smile that curved her lips, the hatred simmering in her eyes. Their gazes locked across the distance. For a heartbeat, time froze. Then Camille whispered, her voice carrying eerily through the night air. This isn't over. And just as suddenly as she appeared, she melted back into the shadows, leaving only silence and the thrum of danger behind. Maya stayed on the balcony long after Camille had gone, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles ached. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that the restraining orders, the evidence, the exposure would have been enough, that Camille would retreat, broken. But Camille Harrington was not a woman who retreated. By morning, the house buzzed with unease. Harris reported the incident to Richard, his face grim. She didn't cross the line, he said. Not legally, But she was close enough to remind us she can come whenever she wants. Richard's expression hardened, but his voice betrayed fatigue. We'll tighten security again. More guards, more cameras. But Maya knew it wasn't enough. Locks and gates kept out thieves. Camille was no thief. Camille was a storm that seeped through cracks, through hearts, through minds. She was patient, relentless, and poisoned by obsession. That evening, as Maya sat alone in her small room, the note still folded on her desk, she understood a truth she had tried to deny. This wasn't a passing battle. It wasn't a chapter soon to be closed. Camille would not stop until she had destroyed her, or until Maya destroyed her first. She lifted the note once more, staring at the words carved into paper, and whispered, as if to Camille herself, "I'm not afraid of you anymore. If you want a war, you'll get one. But I'll be the one who wins." Outside, the night pressed heavy against the windows. Somewhere unseen, Camille was watching, and Maya knew the game had only just begun. The winter morning was pale and quiet, sunlight spilling gently across the nursery floor. Maya Williams sat cross-legged beside Noah's crib, arranging his blocks into a crooked little tower. The boy, barely old enough to string thoughts into words, giggled as the wooden pieces tumbled down. Maya laughed softly with him. "You like making messes, don't you?" His big brown eyes sparkled, his hands clapping at the sound. And then it happened. A single word, clear, fragile, unmistakable. Maya. Maya froze. Her breath caught as if the air had turned solid around her. She blinked, unsure if she'd imagined it. But Noah's lips curved into a smile, and again with childlike certainty, he repeated, "Maya." Her chest ached, not with pain, but with something deeper. A swelling warmth, a fragile joy. For months she had endured whispers, lies, threats, humiliation. For months she had wondered if her sacrifices meant anything. And now this little voice, sweet and pure, shattered the doubt. Tears welled in her eyes. She reached for his small hand and whispered, "You know my name. You really know me." The boy leaned into her embrace, resting his head against her shoulder, as though he too understood the weight of the moment. For Maya Williams, it wasn't just a word. It was proof. Proof that she mattered. Proof that she wasn't invisible. Proof that all the battles she had fought, every insult, every scar, had been for something. Later that day, as she carried Noah through the quiet halls, the boy clung to her with unusual affection. Every so often he repeated her name in a soft murmur, almost like a lullaby he was teaching himself. "Maya, Maya." The sound was a balm to her tired spirit. It erased for a few precious moments the sting of Camille's words, the scorn of the wealthy guests, the whispers of the servants who still doubted her. She paused by a tall window, watching the winter sun stretch over the Harrington estate. Her reflection in the glass startled her. She saw the exhaustion in her face, the sleepless nights, the quiet tears no one noticed. But she also saw something else. Strength. A quiet, unyielding strength that hadn't been there before. Maybe all of this, she whispered to herself, wasn't for nothing. Noah stirred in her arms, looked up at her, and said it again. "Maya." The simplicity of it broke her heart wide open. She kissed the top of his head, rocking him gently. "As long as you know me, as long as you see me, I can keep going." For the first time in weeks, the weight pressing on her chest eased. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that victory wasn't just possible, it was already beginning. Not in courtrooms or grand drawing rooms, but here, in the tender bond between a child and the woman who refused to abandon him. But peace never lasted long in the Harrington estate. That evening, as dusk settled over the gardens, Maya stepped out with Noah bundled in her arms. The air was sharp and cold, filled with the faint smell of rain. She walked slowly along the gravel path, humming a tune to soothe him. The boy dozed, his cheek warm against her shoulder. Something pricked at the edge of her awareness. A feeling, that subtle chill that came when unseen eyes followed your every move. Maya's gaze drifted to the far edge of the property, where the iron gates cast long shadows across the ground. And there, half hidden beneath a tree, stood a figure, still, poised, watching. Her heart lurched. Even at a distance, even cloaked in fading light, she knew. Camille. The woman's posture radiated fury. Her arms were crossed tightly, her head tilted with a venomous poise. And though the space between them was wide, Maya could almost hear the hiss of her jealousy. Camille's eyes fixed on the child, on Noah, and then flicked to Maya. The hatred burning there was unmistakable. Maya tightened her hold on the boy, whispering into his hair, "Don't look, don't worry, you're safe." For a long, unbearable moment, the standoff held. The mother who had abandoned him, poisoned by wine and lies, glaring across the divide at the woman who had become his refuge. Finally, Camille turned sharply and vanished into the dark beyond the gate. But the echo of her rage lingered like smoke, suffocating and thick. Maya carried Noah back inside, her steps quick, her pulse unsteady. Yet even as fear coiled in her stomach, she held on to the sound of his little voice, the voice that had called her by name. That single word was her shield now, her proof, her small light in the gathering storm. And she swore to herself, "No matter how dark Camille's shadow grows, I will protect this light, even if it costs me everything." The night was heavy with silence. The Harrington estate slept, but Maya Williams sat awake in her small room, a single lamp burning on the desk. Across from her, Nurse Jackson leaned forward, voice low, almost conspiratorial. "We can't just keep surviving her games," the nurse whispered. "We need proof, something she can't twist or erase." Maya nodded, her fingers tightening around the teacup. Audio, video, the truth in black and white. For weeks, Camille had spread lies through the halls. False whispers, poisonous rumors, carefully staged performances of innocence. Each time Maya came close to exposing her, the evidence slipped away. But now with allies, with strategy, there was a chance to turn the tide. "We'll record everything," Maya said. "Every threat, every word, every time she tries to corner me." The nurse's eyes glinted with resolve. "If she speaks, if she slips even once, we'll have it. And once the right eyes see the truth, Camille can't hide behind money or charm anymore." But in the shadows of the grand house, another set of ears was listening. Lydia, the quiet servant whose loyalties were more tangled than anyone admitted, lingered just beyond the half-open door. She didn't hear every word, but she heard enough. Flash drives, recordings, evidence. Her lips curved in a faint, secret smile. She knew where her allegiance lay, and it wasn't with Maya Williams. The following evening, Maya prepared the trap. On her desk sat a small flash drive, plain, silver, and carefully placed in view. But the files inside weren't recordings or evidence. They were empty, nothing but a decoy. "This is the one she'll take," Maya murmured to herself. "She won't be able to resist." The real recordings, carefully gathered with the nurse's help, were hidden elsewhere, tucked into a hollowed book inside her nightstand, invisible to anyone who didn't know. That night she left the decoy deliberately unguarded, a quiet stage set for betrayal. Hours passed. The mansion breathed in its usual rhythm, distant footsteps of guards, the faint creak of wood settling, the whisper of wind at the windows. Maya lay still in bed, her body tense, her breathing even as if asleep. And then she heard it, the faintest sound, the slow turn of her doorknob. A shadow slipped into the room. Lydia. The woman's steps were careful, practiced, almost graceful as she moved toward the desk. Maya kept her eyes half shut, her chest rising in the rhythm of sleep. She watched through her lashes as Lydia's hand closed around the flash drive. A quick glance around the room, a tightening of her jaw, and then she slipped back out into the hallway, the silver glint of the drive clutched in her fist. Maya exhaled silently into the dark. The bait was taken. The next morning, whispers rippled through the staff wing. Lydia moved with unusual briskness, her chin lifted, her eyes flicking toward Maya with veiled contempt. It didn't take much to guess where the stolen flash drive had gone. Straight into Camille's hands. Maya said nothing. She folded sheets, polished silver, carried trays of tea with calm precision. But inside, she was smiling. That evening, she met Nurse Jackson in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria. "She took it," Maya whispered. The nurse raised her brows. "The decoy?" Maya nodded. "Camille thinks she has what she wanted. She'll waste time gloating, spinning her lies around nothing. Meanwhile, we'll finish securing the real files. Copies, certifications, everything ironclad." For the first time in months, relief brushed against her heart. It wasn't a full victory, not yet, but it was something stronger. Leverage. Later, alone in her small room, she sat by the window and whispered into the dark. "You thought you stole my truth, Camille, but all you stole was silence." Outside, the estate loomed, quiet and cold. Somewhere, Camille and Lydia plotted, certain they held the upper hand. But Maya Williams knew better. The trap was working. The war wasn't over, but for once, the ground beneath her feet didn't feel like quicksand. For once, she wasn't just defending, she was leading. And in the quiet, she promised herself, this was only the beginning. The morning air was cool and sharp, filled with the hush of an estate that seemed to hold its breath. Maya Williams clutched a small cloth bag to her chest as if it were her own heartbeat. Inside, wrapped in layers of fabric, was the true flash drive, the one containing the recordings. Camille Harrington's voice, her threats, her laughter in the dark. Proof that could not be twisted or explained away. Nurse Jackson walked beside her, posture firm, eyes scanning the street as they approached the lawyer's office downtown. The building was old brick, its tall windows catching the early sun. "This is it," the nurse whispered. "Once it's filed, once it's official, she can't bury it." Maya swallowed, her pulse drumming. "I just need the truth to live somewhere she can't reach." Inside, the lawyer, a graying man with calm, deliberate movements, welcomed them into a quiet conference room. His desk was orderly, his suit pressed, his gaze steady. He listened without interruption as Maya explained how the evidence was gathered, how Lydia had taken the decoy, how Camille had grown careless. When the lawyer slid the flash drive into his computer and pressed play, the silence in the room grew taut. Camille's voice spilled into the air, sharp, venomous, undeniable. "You think you can stand against me, Maya Williams? You're nothing. I'll bury you." The lawyer leaned back, hands steepled. "This is strong. With this, any judge will see through her. And if it reaches the press," he let the thought trail off. Maya exhaled, her shoulders trembling with the weight of relief. For the first time, the truth was no longer fragile. It had a home outside her own trembling hands. "Leave it with me," the lawyer said gently. "I'll make sure this becomes a shield you can stand behind." Maya nodded. She left the office with empty hands, but for once that emptiness felt like freedom. The Harrington estate loomed silent when Maya returned. The staff bustled, but their whispers seemed sharper, more urgent. She felt eyes on her back as she crossed the grand hallway. Then, a hand seized her arm, hard, violent. She gasped, spinning, and there was Camille Harrington, her silk robe belted tight, her face pale with rage, her eyes glittering like broken glass. "You little thief," Camille hissed. "You think you can humiliate me? Handing scraps of gossip to lawyers? Poisoning Richard against me? Do you know who I am?" Maya tried to pull free, but Camille shoved her back against the paneled wall. The impact rattled the frames, and pain flared through Maya's shoulder. "You don't belong here." Camille's voice cracked, high and furious. "This is my house, my child, my life. And you—" She slapped Maya across the face, the sound echoing down the marble corridor. "You are dirt under my shoes." Maya's vision blurred with the sting, but her voice came steady. "If I'm nothing, Camille, why are you so afraid of me?" That cut deep. Camille's expression twisted, fury folding into desperation. She lunged again, fingers curled like claws toward Maya's throat. And that was when a deeper voice thundered through the hall. "Camille!" Richard Harrington's footsteps pounded against the polished floor as he stormed into view. His eyes locked on his wife, her hand raised, her body taut with rage. Maya pinned against the wall. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them. The mask Camille had worn for so long, perfect wife, perfect mother, slipped, and what stood before him was something raw, feral, undeniable. Richard Harrington grabbed Camille's wrist mid-swing. His grip was firm, his expression carved in stone. Enough! Camille's eyes flickered. Richard, she's lying to you. She's poisoning this house. She stole from us. I saw what I saw, Richard cut her off, his voice like steel. And I've heard what others whisper, but I never thought. He looked at Maya, then back at Camille. His jaw tightened. Until now. Camille struggled in his grip, her tone turning sickly sweet. Darling, you know me. You know what I've sacrificed for this family. She's nothing, Richard. A maid, a manipulator. Don't let her destroy us. But Richard's eyes didn't soften. He looked at Maya again. Her cheek was red from the slap, her dark eyes unwavering, filled not with vengeance but with something quieter. The steady truth. You've crossed a line, Camille, Richard said at last. His voice was heavy, carrying not just anger, but something deeper. Doubt. For the first time, doubt in his wife. Camille pulled free and straightened her robe, trying to summon her old dignity. You'll regret this, she spat, her voice trembling. Both of you. She swept down the hall, her heels clicking sharp against the marble, her figure vanishing into the shadows of the estate. Maya stood in silence, her chest rising and falling with ragged breath. Richard lingered a moment, staring at the space his wife had left behind. Then his gaze returned to Maya. Tell me everything, he said quietly. No more secrets. And in that moment, Maya Williams realized something had shifted. The fortress Camille had built with lies and charm now had its first crack. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the beginning. The days following the confrontation in the corridor became a blur of tension and determination. Maya Williams moved through the Harrington estate with quiet resolve, her cheek still tender from Camille Harrington's slap. Yet beneath the sting lay something far stronger. Momentum. The lawyer now had the recordings. Richard Harrington had seen the mask slip. The walls of Camille's fortress were beginning to crack. But Maya knew one truth above all. Recordings alone might not be enough. Camille had money. Camille had influence. Camille had the art of twisting perception until lies sounded like scripture. What Maya needed was a chorus of voices, testimony that could not be dismissed as a single servant's accusations, so she returned to the hospital. Nurse Jackson met her at the side entrance, a thermos of coffee in hand and worry written across her face. You're brave for walking back into this mess, she said softly. I'm not brave, Maya answered. I'm just tired of being silent. One by one, they gathered in a quiet break room away from prying eyes. Nurses, a paramedic, even a young doctor who had been present the night Noah Harrington was rushed in. Their voices overlapped, hesitant at first, but slowly steadying into something stronger. She was intoxicated. You could smell it. The syringe was on the floor, clear as day. The boy clung to Maya Williams. He wouldn't let go. Maya wrote it all down. She collected statements, signatures, times, and dates. Each testimony felt like a stone placed carefully into a wall she was building. Not a wall of fear, but of protection, a fortress of truth. As the papers piled higher, she felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't just her word against Camille's anymore. It was the voices of professionals, people whose oaths bound them to honesty. Still, in the pit of her stomach, Maya knew Camille would not sit idle. Camille would find a way to strike back. Camille Harrington did not disappoint. The whispers began first. A maid in the house muttered that Maya had fabricated stories for attention. A driver claimed he'd been offered money to testify against Camille, but turned it down. By the week's end, Maya heard the truth. Camille was offering bribes. One evening, as the sun slipped low and painted the Harrington estate in long shadows, the old security guard found Maya in the staff corridor. His face was lined with worry. Be careful, he murmured. She's sending money under the table, envelopes with names on them, promises of promotions, promises of jobs elsewhere, if people will speak against you. Maya's stomach tightened. And are they taking it? He hesitated. Some, not all. But she doesn't need all. She just needs enough doubt to stain the truth. That night, Maya lay awake in her small room, the weight of the battle pressing against her ribs. Camille was powerful not because she told convincing stories, but because she understood how fragile reputation could be. How a single doubt, whispered in the right ear, could spread like fire. But Maya also understood something now. Lies were quick. Truth was patient. If she could keep the chain of evidence intact, if she could protect it long enough, Camille's bribes would rot into nothing. She resolved to move carefully, to shield her allies from retaliation. She carried copies of testimonies to the lawyer's office, locking them in a fireproof safe. Every time she left, she felt Camille's eyes somewhere in the distance, watching, calculating, and yet Maya did not waver. The first true test came on a night of glitter and champagne. The Harringtons were expected at a charity gala, a lavish affair in the grand ballroom of a historic hotel downtown. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light across velvet drapes, violins hummed in the corner, and men in tuxedos sipped aged brandy while women floated past in gowns worth more than most people's homes. Maya Williams walked in beside Richard Harrington, her simple navy dress a quiet defiance against the sea of emerald and silver. She could feel the stares. Whispers swelled like waves around her. Some saw her as a scandal, others as a curiosity. Few saw her as herself. And then she saw Camille. Camille Harrington stood near the champagne fountain, her gown of pale silk shimmering, her smile dazzling, her posture flawless. If Maya hadn't seen the venom beneath, she might have mistaken her for the perfect socialite. But Camille's eyes told another story. They burned with fury the moment they locked onto Maya's. Richard stiffened beside her. "Stay calm," he murmured. Camille glided across the floor, every step deliberate, her laughter falling silent as she drew near. "Richard," she purred, "what a surprise to see you. And your little shadow." Her gaze slid to Maya, dripping with contempt. "How brave of you to bring her here. Truly charitable." Maya met her stare, steady and unflinching. "I was invited, just like you." Camille's smile sharpened. Her voice rose just enough to carry across the nearest tables. "Yes, but some invitations are mistakes. Some people mistake kindness for opportunity. You give them a job, and suddenly they think they're entitled to everything you have. Even your husband's attention." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Conversations faltered. A spotlight of silence fell on them. Richard's jaw clenched. But before he could speak, Maya stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "When your son was bleeding on the floor, I didn't think about money or attention. I thought about saving him. That's what I did. That's the truth. And if you want to tell a story tonight, Camille, tell all of it. Tell them about the syringe. Tell them about the hospital staff who saw you. Tell them how many people are ready to testify." The ballroom was silent now, all ears tuned to her words. Camille's perfect smile faltered, her mask slipping for a flicker of a second. She turned sharply, her gown swishing as she stormed away, whispers chasing her through the crowd. Richard looked at Maya, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "You handled that better than I ever could." But Maya knew this was not the end. This was only the first public battle. Camille had retreated, but only to regroup, and next time Maya would have to be even stronger. It started with a headline. Maya Williams was carrying fresh laundry through the quiet Harrington halls when she heard the staff radio crackle. One of the younger maids whispered, "It's everywhere. The news. It's about her." By the time Maya reached the kitchen, the cook had folded a newspaper flat on the table. And there, splashed across the front page in bold letters, was a headline that made Maya's chest tighten. "Gold-digging maid or hero. The Harrington scandal deepens." Her hands trembled as she read the words. Photographs taken at the gala had been twisted. Maya's steady posture turned into arrogance. Camille's departure described as humiliation, orchestrated by a scheming servant. Columnists dissected her every move, her every glance, painting her as a social climber who had clawed her way into the Harrington family's graces. Richard Harrington stormed into the room, another paper in hand. "This is Camille," he snapped. "She's feeding them stories." And she was. By afternoon, gossip shows had run with it. The maid who wanted to be mistress. servant turned scandal. Everywhere Maya's name appeared, it was coated with suspicion and venom. For the first time, Maya felt what Camille had always known how to wield, the court of public opinion. And in that court, Camille was winning. Camille Harrington's campaign of slander spread like wildfire. Anonymous sources whispered that Maya had a history of chasing wealthy employers. A forged record appeared online, claiming she had once stolen jewelry from a former household. Talk show hosts smirked at the idea of a maid trying to play mother to a billionaire's son. At the estate, the phone rang constantly. Some calls offered support. Others hissed threats. Richard tried to shield her, ordering staff to hang up, ordering Harris to track the sources. But Maya felt the poison sinking in. One evening, as she sat with Noah Harrington in the nursery, she heard his soft voice. He was clutching his stuffed rabbit, his eyes heavy with sleep. "Maya Williams," he whispered. "Don't go." The sound of her full name from his small mouth cracked something inside her. She brushed his hair back gently. "I'm not going anywhere, Noah. Not ever." But when she left the nursery, the hall was filled with whispers again. Lydia's voice, low but cutting, to another maid. "She's just waiting for her payout. Camille was right all along." Maya stopped, her fists tightening, but she didn't confront them. Not yet. She had learned that words could be twisted. What she needed wasn't rage. It was proof. And proof came sooner than she expected. It happened at the hospital. Noah had a scheduled checkup with his pediatrician, part of the ongoing care after his injury. Maya accompanied Richard and the boy, her heart pounding with every step through the sterile white halls. She could feel the stares of nurses, some warm, others wary, each one touched by the stories in the papers. Inside the exam room, the doctor bent down with a gentle smile. "How are you feeling today, Noah?" The boy looked up, his little voice clear. "Better, because of Maya Williams." The doctor's pen froze on the clipboard. Richard blinked, surprised. Maya felt tears burn the corners of her eyes. The doctor asked softly, "Can you tell me what you remember, Noah?" Noah clutched Maya's hand. "I fell. Mommy was mad. She had the sharp thing. But Maya Williams helped me. Maya Williams called the people with the lights." Silence filled the room. Every word the child spoke was simple, but undeniable. Not coached, not rehearsed, just truth, spilling from the mouth of a boy too young to understand lies. The doctor's gaze met Richard's, steady and solemn. "That aligns with what we saw. His memory is intact." Richard's jaw tightened. He placed a hand on his son's small shoulder, then looked at Maya with something that was no longer skepticism, no longer doubt, but respect. Later that evening, word spread quietly among hospital staff. Camille Harrington's version of events, the glamorous lies she had whispered at cocktail parties and charity dinners, began to crumble. The child himself had spoken, and his truth carried more weight than all her headlines combined. Back at the estate, Maya tucked Noah into bed. He was already half asleep, his voice fading into a murmur. "Don't let Mommy take me." Her throat tightened. She kissed his forehead. "No one is taking you, Noah. Not while I breathe." As she closed the door, she felt the storm outside growing darker. Camille Harrington would not forgive this. The lies had failed to silence Maya, and now even her son had betrayed her narrative. Maya knew the next strike would come harder, sharper, more dangerous. But she also knew something else. She was no longer fighting alone. The envelope arrived at dawn. Maya Williams was pouring herself a cup of bitter coffee in the quiet kitchen when Harris entered, his face tight. He set a plain brown envelope on the table without a word. Inside was a single photograph, her mother. The image was grainy, taken in the sterile light of the care facility, but there was no mistaking the fear in her mother's wide eyes. On the back, written in Camille Harrington's elegant, venomous script, were 6 words that made Maya's blood run cold. "Tell Richard you lied, or she suffers." For a moment, Maya couldn't breathe. The walls of the Grand Harrington estate seemed to tilt around her. Her mother, frail and already suffering, had nothing to do with this war. And yet Camille had reached across the fragile sanctuary of the hospital and pulled her into the battlefield. Harris's voice broke through the pounding in her ears. This is escalation. She's not just targeting you anymore. She's targeting your family. Maya pressed the photo against her chest, her hands trembling. She knows where my mother sleeps, where she eats, where she breathes. The coffee on the table had gone cold. So had the morning, and so had Maya's faith that there were any limits Camille would not cross. By midday, Maya Williams sat in Richard Harrington's study, the heavy drapes pulled against the pale winter light. The photograph lay between them on the desk, a silent accusation. Richard's jaw tightened as he stared at it. We can take this to the police. Intimidation of a witness, blackmail, threats against family. This is enough to bury her. Maya's voice cracked as she answered. And what happens in the meantime? What if she panics? What if she makes good on the threat before the law even blinks? Richard didn't answer. His silence was its own kind of confession. He knew Camille Harrington too well. The weight of choice pressed down on Maya like an iron chain. She could stay silent, protect her mother, and let Camille continue her campaign of lies until the truth drowned beneath them. Or she could hand over the evidence she'd fought so hard to gather and risk her mother's life in the process. No path was safe. That night, sitting by Noah Harrington's crib, Maya whispered the dilemma into the quiet. The boy stirred, his small fingers clutching hers even in sleep. His warmth reminded her of why she was here, why she endured the insults, the cruelty, the racism whispered in champagne-soaked halls. She wasn't here for herself. She was here for him, and in that moment, a decision crystallized. She would not surrender, not to Camille's threats, not to her fear, but she also would not walk blindly into the trap. Maya Williams would fight, and she would prepare a second blade hidden in the shadows, sharp and waiting. The next day, Maya returned to the hospital under the guise of visiting her mother. She kissed her mother's cheek, whispered words of comfort, but her eyes scanned every corner of the room, every shadow by the door. When Nurse Jackson entered, Maya pulled her aside. I need a backup. Something outside Richard's house. Somewhere Camille can't reach. The nurse hesitated, then nodded slowly. There's a reporter I trust. Quiet, careful. She doesn't owe Camille anything. If you want the truth anchored somewhere safe, I'll make the introduction. That evening, in a small coffee shop near the waterfront, Maya slid a duplicate flash drive across a scratched wooden table. The reporter, sharp-eyed, steady-voiced, accepted it without hesitation. If anything happens to me, Maya said, her voice low but unshaking, this goes public, all of it. The syringe, the recordings, the threats, everything. The reporter tucked the drive into her bag. Understood. Maya left the cafe with a strange mix of dread and relief. She was walking a tightrope with no safety net, but at least now the truth lived in more than one place. Back at the estate, the halls were quiet, but her heart was not. She sat by her window staring at the faint line of the horizon, the dark waters of Charleston glittering under the moon. She thought of her mother's trembling hands. She thought of Noah's innocent voice calling her name. She thought of Camille's venomous smile promising ruin. And then she whispered into the night, words meant for herself as much as for the enemy circling outside. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of you, not of the darkness. If this is a war, then I'll fight it, until the very end. The mansion remained still, but somewhere beyond its walls, Maya knew Camille Harrington was already planning her next move. And now, so was she. For 2 nights, the Harrington mansion slept under the watch of hidden eyes. Harris had installed a small, secret camera in Noah's nursery, its lens no bigger than a pin, connected not to the house's compromise system, but to a private recorder locked in his office. Maya Williams barely slept. She kept vigil in her small room, the baby monitor whispering static at her side, every creak of the old house making her pulse race. She knew Camille Harrington, knew her persistence, her fury, her belief that blood and wealth would always shield her. Camille would come. The only question was when. The answer came in the cold hour between night and dawn. The monitor crackled with a faint rhythmic sound. Footsteps on the nursery floor. Maya rose instantly, every nerve taut. She pressed her ear to the hallway air, hearing the softest whisper, "Mommy's here, baby. Mommy's here." Her blood turned to ice. She moved silently to the nursery door and pushed it open just enough to see. There, Camille kneeling by the crib, her pale hand brushing Noah's cheek, her auburn hair hidden under a dark scarf. Her voice was low, tremulous with false tenderness. "We're leaving, Noah. Away from her. Away from all of this." Maya stepped into the room. Her voice was steady, though her heart thundered in her chest. "Step away from him, Camille." Camille's head snapped up. Her eyes burned with a feverish light as they locked on Maya. "You!" she spat, venom thick in her throat. "You think you've won? You think you're anything but a dirty maid clinging to a life that isn't yours?" She reached into her coat and pulled out the small vial Lydia had given her, clear liquid glinting in the dim light. Maya's stomach tightened, but her voice didn't waver. "You're not taking him anywhere." Camille's smile twisted. "You can't stop me. He is mine. My blood. My son. You're nothing. You'll always be nothing." And then she moved. She lunged toward the crib, one hand gripping the vial, the other reaching for Noah. Maya intercepted her, shoving her back, the two women colliding with the edge of the crib. The child stirred, whimpered, but did not wake. Camille hissed, clawing at Maya's arm. "You think Richard will keep you once you're broken? He'll throw you out like the rat you are." Maya fought back, her grip iron on Camille's wrist. "I don't care about Richard. I care about him." She nodded toward Noah, still curled in sleep. "And I will not let you hurt him." The vial slipped from Camille's fingers and rolled beneath the crib, glass clinking against the wood floor. Both women froze for a heartbeat, breath ragged, hearts pounding. Then, a new voice. "That's enough, Camille." Harris filled the doorway, his tone sharp as steel. Behind him, two uniformed officers stepped into the room, their flashlights sweeping across the scene. "It's all on camera," Harris said coldly. "Every word, every move. Drop your hands. Now." For the first time, Camille Harrington's composure cracked. Her eyes darted to the crib, to Maya, to the officers recording every detail. Her face twisted with rage and disbelief. "You set me up," she whispered. "You filthy little schemer. You set me up in my own house." Maya didn't answer. She stood steady, though her knees threatened to give way, her body trembling with adrenaline. The officers moved in, taking Camille's arms firmly. She twisted, tried to pull free, her voice rising to a shriek. "You'll regret this. You'll regret this for the rest of your life. Richard! Richard!" Her cries echoed through the mansion as Richard Harrington himself appeared in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes shadowed with a fury Maya had never seen before. He looked at his wife, disheveled, restrained, spitting venom. Then at Maya, her arm bruised, her eyes unwavering, standing guard by his son's crib. And in that moment, something shifted. "I saw enough," Richard said quietly, almost to himself. Then louder to the officers. "Take her out of my house." Camille thrashed once more, her voice breaking into a ragged scream. "You'll burn for this, Maya Williams. You'll burn for every drop of blood, every breath he takes with you near him. You and your kind will always be nothing." The officers pulled her down the hallway, her shrieks fading until the house was quiet again. Heavy, fragile, almost sacred. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Richard looked at Maya, his voice rough but certain. "You saved my son. Again. And this time, I believe you." Maya exhaled slowly, her body trembling with exhaustion. She bent over the crib, brushing a soft curl from Noah's forehead. The boy stirred and sighed, slipping back into sleep, untouched by the storm that had raged around him. The hidden camera had captured everything. The vial lay cold and silent beneath the crib. The war that had stretched across weeks, through whispers and threats and shadows, had finally erupted into light. And for the first time, Maya felt not just the weight of survival, but the strength of victory. Camille Harrington was gone, in handcuffs, her empire of lies crumbling behind her. The house was still. The child was safe. But Maya knew one truth, as sharp and certain as the night air pressing against the windows. This battle was over. The war of shadows and blood was only just beginning. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood, polished brass, and nerves. Reporters lingered on the steps outside, cameras ready, hungry for every detail of the Harrington scandal. Inside, the benches filled quickly with strangers who had no stake in the case beyond their appetite for spectacle. Maya Williams sat at the long oak table beside Richard Harrington and Harris. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, though her heart thudded hard enough that she thought the sound might betray her. Across the aisle, Camille Harrington sat between her attorneys. Her auburn hair was immaculate, her posture regal, her expression a mask of injured dignity. To anyone who didn't know better, she looked like the wronged wife, not the woman who had crouched by her son's crib with a vial of sedative in her coat. The judge entered. The murmurs fell silent. The prosecution began quietly, methodically, building the case brick by brick. Witness testimony, medical reports, a nurse's affidavit, and then the video. On the screen in front of the entire courtroom, Camille Harrington appeared, grainy but unmistakable, her hands stroking Noah's cheek, her voice whispering, "Mommy's here, baby. We're going away together." Then Maya's entrance, the vial, the struggle, Harris's voice, the arrest. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Camille's face drained of color. For the first time, her mask slipped, just slightly, enough for Maya to see the fury simmering beneath. The judge leaned forward. "This," he said, his voice even but cutting, "is irrefutable." During the recess, Camille's attorneys conferred in hushed, frantic tones. They knew the truth. They had lost. When the session resumed, Camille herself stood, her voice steady, though her eyes burned like cold fire. "I will agree," she said slowly, "to step away. From the estate, from Noah, from Richard." She paused, letting her gaze cut into Maya like a blade. "But do not think this is the end. I will not disappear. I will return when you least expect it. You cannot erase me. I am his mother. Blood cannot be erased." Her words rippled across the courtroom like a curse. The judge's gavel came down sharply. "Mrs. Harrington, you will comply with the terms as agreed. You will vacate the residence immediately. You will have no unsupervised contact with the child until further review." Camille's laugh was quiet, almost tender, and infinitely more dangerous than her shouting had ever been. She turned her eyes back to Maya. "Enjoy your little victory," she whispered. "Every empire falls, and when yours does, I will be waiting in the rubble." The bailiff touched her arm, guiding her toward the exit. She didn't resist, but her venom lingered in the air long after her footsteps had faded. The Harrington estate had never been so still. For weeks, the halls had echoed with tension, whispered threats, slammed doors, the weight of suspicion pressing down on every corner. Now at last there was quiet, a fragile quiet, yes, but a quiet that felt almost like peace. Maya walked the corridors that evening with Noah in her arms. The boy giggled softly, his head resting on her shoulder, his small fingers tugging gently at her hair. They paused by the nursery. The crib sat neatly made, the nightlight casting a warm glow across the room. For the first time in months, the space felt like a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. Richard found her there. He stood in the doorway, his shoulders heavier than usual, but his voice softer. "It's over," he said. Maya shook her head gently. "No, it's only paused. People like Camille don't stop. They wait." Richard sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Then we wait too, and we stay ready. But tonight at least, let there be quiet." Maya lowered Noah into the crib, smoothing the blanket over his chest. She lingered, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing. For so long she had braced for the next attack, the next cruel word, the next shadow at the door. But tonight there was none. She stepped back, her hands trembling with something she had almost forgotten how to name. Relief. The estate was still. The child was safe. The battle was won. And in that silence, heavy, imperfect, but real, Maya Williams allowed herself to believe that victory, however costly, was possible. The day the papers were signed, the sky over Charleston was clear and sharp, as though even the weather had paused to acknowledge the weight of what had happened. Maya Williams sat at the long mahogany table in Richard Harrington's study, pen trembling slightly in her hand. Before her lay the documents that would alter the shape of her life forever. Legal guardianship, her name written beside Noah's. A line of ink that bound her to the boy not as staff, not as an outsider, but as protector. Richard watched her in silence. His expression was grave, but his eyes carried something softer, something that looked dangerously like trust. "Are you certain?" he asked quietly. "Once this is official, there's no going back. His life, your life, they'll be tied." Maya lifted her chin. "They already are." Her voice was steady, though her chest ached with the truth of it. Every sleepless night, every insult she had endured, every bruise Camille had left, every whispered threat, it had all been for this, for the child who had once clung to her finger in terror and had now learned to smile again. The pen scratched across the paper, one signature, then another. The final stroke felt like a battle cry. When it was done, she leaned back, breathless. Richard reached across the table, not to shake her hand, but to cover it with his own. "Thank you," he said simply. Maya swallowed hard. For a moment, she almost believed it was over. Life in the Harrington estate shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Noah laughed more. His nightmares grew fewer. He ran down the halls on unsteady legs, calling her name, his giggles filling spaces once haunted by silence. The staff's glances softened too. Where once there had been suspicion, now there was something like respect, or at least the acknowledgement that she had survived what none of them would have dared face. Lydia kept her distance, eyes sharp, lips thin, but even her barbs lost their edge. Maya's world became rhythm again, morning feedings, afternoon walks, bedtime stories whispered in the warm glow of the nursery lamp. Yet beneath it all lay a tension that never fully eased. Sometimes when she crossed the courtyard, she swore she felt eyes on her back. When she stepped into the kitchen at night, shadows seemed longer than they should have been. Harris doubled the patrols. Richard assured her Camille was gone, banished by law and by disgrace. But Maya knew better. People like Camille didn't vanish. They lingered like smoke, waiting for the right gust of wind to return. Still, for Noah's sake, she smiled. She read his favorite book 3 times in a row when he begged. She let him tug at her braids and kiss her cheek with sticky lips. She let herself believe, for a heartbeat, for a breath, that maybe peace was possible. It arrived on a gray morning, tucked under the gate like any other delivery. A plain white envelope, no stamp, no return address. The driver handed it to her with a shrug. "This one's for you, Miss Williams." Her stomach tightened. She stepped into the sunroom away from Noah's ears and slid a finger under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, elegant, deliberate. "You think this is the end? It is only the beginning." No signature. None was needed. Maya's hand shook, but her jaw set hard. For a long moment she stared out at the manicured lawn, the iron gates beyond, the city skyline glimmering in the distance. Freedom had come, yes, but it was bitter, edged with the promise of more battles to come. She folded the letter slowly, deliberately, and slipped it into the worn notebook where she had kept every record, every scrap of truth, every wound that had carried her here. Noah's laughter echoed from upstairs. Maya closed her eyes and breathed. "The truth costs everything," she whispered to herself, "but it's stronger than any lie." And with that, she turned back toward the sound of the boy's voice, ready for whatever shadows the future might hold. Because she was not just a maid, not just a survivor. She was his guardian, and she was not afraid.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you won't miss what's next.